PhD on flexible
Oh
integration.
dear, yes.
Basically, the idea that not every EU member state has to do the same thing, and that we can have very flexible relations between the EU and other players.
I don't think I've ever been gaslit quite this hard.
I think Canada, in terms of its hold, composure, its value base, is so close
He means he wants us to be the cash cow. That's what he means.
to the European Union that the least the least we can do is to forge a really close strategic partnership.
Yep, you can buy all our stuff at double the price, and we stay part of North America. I mean that. They think we're idiots.
And what that then leads to in the end with the EU, which started as 6, ended up with 28, then after Brexit with 27. I don't know. I can envisage a much larger EU. Whether Canada is a part of it or not is up to Canada.
Yeah. So the answer is no. The answer is going to be no for a while. The answer is going to be no as long as the ocean exists. April 16th, 2026. This is the Comic Reporter, and that was the president of Finland, who, a country I didn't know even had a president or a population anymore, judging by how I've heard that country's being run. But that is the president of Finland trying to convince Canada to trade in its long-term, very beneficial, caring and attentive wife for cheap pornography. I'm sorry, Finland, and I mean, in general, just the EU. But not only is the US younger, hotter, richer, and more fertile than you, but it's also right next door. And while we're on the bit of a hiatus from each other right now, there's no reason to believe that the split will last, since despite popular belief, it's only a matter of time until both countries figure out that it's better if we stay together, you know, for the children. Look, anyone who's ever been married knows that you can't always expect the other side of the aisle to be reasonable or see things your way. Sometimes you fight, sometimes you take a walk, and sometimes you take a little time away from talking. But in a healthy marriage, the fights are where the makeup sex comes from. And makeup sex is how you figure out that the fight wasn't actually that big of a deal. And that anal isn't actually that bad when it's with someone you love. So yes, there will be sacrifices, but one of them will not be giving up our long-term, extremely beautiful and dedicated wife of 150 years in exchange for a group of OnlyFans whores selling their buttholes for $5.99 a month and a 98% reduction on tariffs. As much as America wants to claim that the Western Hemisphere is theirs, the reality is that they share it with Canada and our drug-addled cousin to the south, Mexico. We really need to get Mexico into rehab. I don't know how much longer it's going to last. And I know that some people will take offense to comparing the attention-soaking, bank-breaking, world-cucking European Union to the strong and independent women of the subscription-dependent adult content creation world. But I'm not sure I care all that much. When all you do is soak the riches out of every country that willingly subjugated itself under the will of a stagnant, unelected European Union democracy, I'm sorry, that democracy just starts to look like another man-hating horror to me. In fact, maybe before the WEF starts taxing the air we breathe, it should consider getting on Fansly so it can tell its fans how much it wants to screw them before it actually goes out and does it. See, Canada's government and ruling class is already stacked with unelected bureaucrats and underskilled nepotistic hires filled with disdain for the actual citizens of the very country they claim to love. It doesn't need another 27 layers of needy children pulling at its purse strings and shaming its people into accepting guilt for the crimes of civilizations long since past. Canada has all those things covered without needing to fill the EU's pockets with an already declining Canadian dollar. And if Canada did join the EU, what if it doesn't work out? I mean, how did Brexit go for the UK? Did they happily walk out into the sunset and enjoy their newfound freedom, projecting the British power and global ambition they knew before the EU wrapped their greedy tendrils around its sovereign pride and currency? Or did Britain decide that it would import the entirety of the criminals from every third world country you can think of in order to breed the Caucasian out of every civilly disobedient nutter available? That seems like an unhealthy divorce of the worst kind, where leaving the EU not only strips both the pros and cons of joining the EU, but also leaves question marks around what the actual identity of the country is. Is the UK Christian? Is it Muslim? Is it Hindu? Is it democracy? Maybe a dictatorship? No one knows. It seems like a high price to pay for a few years of being a member of the most destructive union of nations the world has ever seen. Maybe aside from the Soviet Union, but at least the Soviet Union went away when it was no longer useful. No, Canada is already struggling to find itself after 10 years of deciding that since every Canadian had the right to be special, no one actually gets to be. Our schools are already full of non nationalists soaking millions of dollars out of our taxpayers so they can learn how many genders actually exist and why it's important to punch every Nazi you can successfully add that label to. And by the way, everyone is a Nazi in Canada if you ask the right people. Everyone who does not see things your way is a Nazi. That's why we have the NDP party. So, as you can see, there really isn't a whole lot the EU could bring to Canada that we haven't already inflicted upon ourselves. We have a globalist banker as a prime minister, an unelected governor general, an appointed federal court that no one can fire, and so many layers of government that even Quebec can't hope for them all to speak French. Yes, we know that one of the EU's greatest claims to fame is how adept it has become at forcing conflicting and incompatible societies together through incentives and quotas for immigration while adding nothing to figure out exactly how these backward societies can be coached to live in a straight line instead of on a bell curve. But as you can see, Canada has had that covered on its own. Even without the pressure from the EU, the European settlers that made Canada great have found themselves considering a recolonization of places like Brampton and Vancouver because why not? Making Canada great again has to start somewhere, otherwise, what are we conserving? See, the way it works in practice is that disparate societies are not homogenous, and as much as the EU, federal Canadians, and WEF want to ignore the hell they have created and continue to endorse, the people themselves have begun to shrug off the shameful labels put on those who call out the problems, and that probably won't sit well with the ivory tower professionally mentally ill ignoramuses the EU calls experts. Yes, people hate people sometimes for good reason. That's not a crime. The crime is actually making them live together. Yes, the crime is making them live together, knowing that one of the people you're forcing into the neighborhood is more likely to kill someone than be useful. And then excusing him when he does kill someone because deportation. So, as you can see, European Union, Canada is already benefiting from all your political policies without you even being present. We don't need your bureaucracy to make sure that ours continues to churn out some of the most anti Canadian ideas in the history of the Great White North. We have more than enough victims, more than enough genders, and more than enough activists, and more than enough white liberal Karens to keep us going for at least the next century. And yet, despite all of that, most of us still embrace the vision of what this country could be, and we're smart enough to recognize that it will never be that if the European Union is allowed to stick what's left of its decrepit and rotting genitals into our reproductive sac and fertilize us with the policies that are extra corrosive just to make sure we suffer as much as the rest of the world is. Because Canada is an egalitarian nation, after all. It is as close to socialist as you can get without having to build the work camps or starving 20 million citizens to death. It still has a sliver of the democratic system it was built on, and despite the floor crossing knuckleheads who decided they wanted to be part of the Great Canadian Implosion, there is still fight left in this country that will never be beaten out of it. Despite Quebec's perpetual whining, Alberta's screams for freedom, BC's addiction to drugs, the Maritime's desire for welfare, and Toronto's dedication to eviscerating its real estate sector, most of Canada understands that the solution to all of its problems is actually very simple. Stop listening to Europe. If you want to live a good life, don't take advice from the suicidal ramblings of an expertly trained replica of a human being. No matter how many times that person's performative monster shows you how it thinks a person should act, it will never understand what humanity is and thus cannot be trusted with a puppy. Never mind a population. We've seen how the EU's dedication to its Russophobia has emptied the country of Ukraine of all of its fighting age males and encouraged the elimination of all things Russified from the Ukrainian culture. including the people. We've watched while its empathy for Syrian refugees has allowed a literal army of them to be constructed within Germany's own borders. We've seen Romania delegitimize its own elections with the resounding applause of the EU's own Council. And we watched Britain crumble under the weight of the gutting it received while under the umbrella of the all encompassing social unity the EU proclaims to endorse. Yes, European Union, you've made your point and we heard you. You hate the Western world and everyone in it. You hate prosperity you do not control, policy you do not make, and money you cannot hold. You hate the family unit, children that are protected from danger, women that do not work, and men that do anything other than kiss your own feet. We see you. We heard you. You're not welcome here. You can take your Finnish delegate and shove him right up your pretentious, flimsy, unionized butthole. But I'll never pay $5.99 a month to look at it. Not when I have so much free content right here at home.